Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Here we are getting you your weekly dose of major international news with a perspective. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Nawaz Sharif, Pakistan's new Prime Minister, swings into action. World Panorama takes a look at the big challenges ahead, including ties with India. Turkey continues to protest even as Prime Minister appeals for calm. A look at what's been called Turkey's Arab Spring. Barack Obama defends sweeping NSA surveillance program, says can't have 100% security and 100% privacy. And in sports, Roberto Martinez is the new Everton FC manager, says his aim is to take Everton into the Champions League. Straight to the story in focus this week. Nawaz Sharif has become the Prime Minister of Pakistan for an unprecedented third term. Washington is greeting his return to power with cautious optimism. There is an overriding sense that it is in the United States' interest for Nawaz Sharif to succeed, even if his government will be less pro-American than its predecessor. Many believe the looming question is now whether Nawaz Sharif has learned from the past. Have the experiences of previous governments and lengthy exile turned him into a committed Democrat and statesman, or will his authoritarian tendencies again resurface? The stakes are high. If Sharif's government can stabilize Pakistan's economy, improve domestic security and normalize relations with neighboring India and Afghanistan, there will be reason for hope that his nuclear-armed country of nearly 200 million people can, in time, remove itself from the list of failing states and follow a path to growth, stability and sustainable democracy. The derailed Indo-Pak ties now may get back on track if the newly elected Pakistan Premier pursues the removal of trade barriers and declares India a most favoured nation. India has so far maintained that there will be progress in bilateral talks only if Pakistan makes a credible move to punish the perpetrators of the Mumbai terror attacks. Many say if the new Pakistan government gives a positive signal, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh may extend an olive branch to Sharif during his upcoming Srinagar visit on the 25th of June. This week, we try and understand Pakistan's future vis-a-vis its foreign policy, the way forward for India and Pakistan ties, and other challenges that loom for Sharif. I'm pleased to welcome Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor with the Hindustan Times. Before, Pramit, we get your perspective, take a look at this report.
Years after he was disposed in a coup and sent into exile, Nawaz Sharif was back in the sprawling Prime Minister's house in Islamabad. In a speech long on rhetoric but short on specifics, Sharif vowed to address the myriad of problems facing the country of 180 million people, including unemployment, electricity blackouts, inflation, corruption, a disillusioned youth, and extremism and lawlessness.
ये ऐवान अच्छी तरह जानता है कि वतन अजीज़ किन संगीन मसाइल से दोचार है। लोड शेडिंग, महंगाई, कर्ज़ों का पहाड़, बेरोज़गारी, तबाह हाल मईशत, नौजवानों में फैली मायूसी, इंतहा पसंदी और बदअमनी, बढ़ती हुई गुर्बत, तबाही का शिकार सरकारी इदारे, हर सू फैली करप्शन और पाकिस्तान का कमज़ोर आलमी तशख़्ख़ुस, ग़रज़ मसाइल का एक जंगल उगा हुआ है। मेरी हुकूमत इन मसाइल का चैलेंज कबूल कर रही है।
Speaking to Parliament after being elected, he once again called for an end to the drone policy.
ये रोज़-रोज़ का सिलसिला है जो ड्रोन्स के अटैक का, ये सिलसिला ये बंद होना चाहिए। पिछला भी हम दूसरों की खुद मुख्तारी का एहतराम करते हैं, लाजिम है दूसरों पर भी को हमारी खुद मुख्तारी का भी एहतराम करें।
Meanwhile, Pakistan's arch rival India welcomed the newly elected Prime Minister of Pakistan, hoping for better bilateral relations in the coming days.
There are some issues that people have felt in our country extremely aggrieved about, and have felt tremendously hurt about. And I think that it would be important that that sense of hurt be addressed and removed. And I'm sure that he has the capacity and he has the ability to be able to not only address those issues, but build upon the opportunity that we have for reaching out.
During the poll campaign, Sharif had vowed to revive the Indo-Pak peace process interrupted in 1999 by Musharraf. He had started the peace process with then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Nawaz Sharif's Pakistan Muslim League N roamed to victory and will command 186 of the 342 seats in the new assembly, giving it significant leverage to oust Zardari from the president's house when his term expires in September.
All right, Pramit, now Nawaz Sharif has highlighted his priorities. We heard his speech pursuing aggressive economic diplomacy and favoring a peaceful neighborhood. Now, that does give us a sense of, where he's headed in which direction. What do you make of the statements?
Well, I think the real core of his policy in the immediate several months is going to be the economy. That's by far the number one problem that he faces. In many ways, that's the reason why he was re-elected with such a huge margin, is that the economy in Pakistan is in very poor shape. Right. Growth is probably about 3.5%. But more importantly, foreign exchange reserves in May were down to $7 billion. That's about the same as Nepal. And Pakistan has barely enough foreign exchange to cover about 90 days worth of imports. And the core of that is fuel. If they cannot get more foreign exchange, they're not going to be able to import oil. The power sector is even worse than India's, which is bad enough. Their railway system is collapsing. They are a good nation of exporters, which is why at the economic side, when he says economic diplomacy, MFN status to India is probably the number one item on his agenda, because he believes it will help his economy. I mean, it's a self-interested policy, but it's part of an overall revival of the Pakistan economy.
So that, you're saying, will take precedence, the economic status of Pakistan, and raising that perhaps. Nawaz Sharif realizes that, aligning itself with India would help Pakistan move up economically. It's really facing a lot of crisis, as we also mentioned in our report.
Yeah, I think the economic side for him is really about how do I Pakistan has benefited from exports. It's done very well on the export side. It's a big exporter of rice, cotton, wheat. It's competitive in textiles, competitive against India. So therefore, India is an obvious market that it should be looking at. And so that's an obvious area. And his own constituency are businessmen, urban traders, professionals. They would tend to see this as a positive. So yes, he's going to push, I think, MFN status. I don't think the military has any problems with that. His real problem is going to be, how do I push a trade and economic policy with India without being able to handle the issue of terrorism and violence between the two countries?
Right. Having said that, in his speech, he also talked about the US drone strikes and how he said, Pakistan wants to put an end to these attacks. And this statement comes, very close to another drone strike. So that makes it close to about 14 drone strikes in 2013 alone. So vis-a-vis the US, what's going to be Pakistan's line?
Well, you have to realize Zardari also opposed the drone strikes in public, but we know that in private he told the Americans, go ahead. The Pakistani military has said exactly the same things. They support the drone strikes. Why? Because it is the drones that keep the Tehrik-i-Taliban, the Pakistan Taliban, which is mainly aimed at fighting the Pakistani government, keeps them in check. I mean, the last major drone attack killed the operational commander of the Tehrik-i-Taliban. So while Pakistanis may be, at the public sense, angered at the attack on their sovereignty that the drones represent, the Pakistani military and quietly the Pakistani civilian leadership know that without the drone attacks, the Tehrik-i-Taliban is a bigger threat to them. So do you want terrorist strikes in Karachi and Lahore, or do you want to have drone strikes up in Waziristan? The answer is you want the drone strikes in Waziristan.
All right.
So my guess is that he'll talk about this, but he won't actually do very much about it.
All right. So many also, according to sources within Nawaz Sharif's party, believe that yes, no matter what he's saying regarding the foreign policy, coming back to India and Pakistan relations again, that no major policy initiative is on the cards soon. Now that's what's the talk that's going around within the circles.
Because keep in mind that whatever else has happened, despite his majority in parliament and his control of Punjab, foreign policy and security policy remains completely in the hands of the army. Civilian rulers, no matter how powerful, have never had any control on this, at least since the time of General Zia-ul-Haq. Right. So therefore, what he may say about India and whatever he may feel about a relationship with India, he cannot implement anything without the military's backing. And the last time he tried to violate this, which is the Lahore peace process, led to the Kargil war, and eventually led to his own overthrow, he knows that he can't go that far. So he's going to wait. He's going to wait for Kayani to decide what to do with Kayani, who should be retiring sometime in this fall.
Right.
Will he replace him with a more pliant army chief? But Musharraf was his appointment, and Musharraf turned on him very quickly. And second, he has to wait for the Indian elections. The Indian government is not in a position politically strong enough to fulfill anything that he may offer other than the very basic stuff of MFN. Yeah. So we'll see MFN status. I think we're going to see forward movement on the gas grid connection, connecting the two Punjabs. Sharif's great plan for an electricity combination between the two countries. Those type of things we'll see forward movement. Nobody's opposed to that. It's politically, nobody cares.
Right.
But a really big peace process that looks at issues like Kashmir and terrorism, that's going to have to wait.
All right, so domestic problems being the main concern, ties with India and the big initiatives that we are talking about are not here to come. We have to wait for the Indian elections and also for the Pakistani establishment to, set its foot and have a firm grip on the...
Well, in particular, who is going to run the military by the end of this year?
Until that's clear. Yeah. On that note, Pramit, thanks so much for joining me on World Panorama this week and sharing your thoughts with us. We're heading into a quick break. Protests continue in Turkey. Prime Minister Erdogan appeals to protesters to go home. More details coming up in a minute. You're watching World Panorama. Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan returned to Turkey on Thursday the same way he left it 4 days earlier. Seething protesters on the streets demanding his resignation and accusing his government of authoritarianism. The demonstrations have spread across Turkey during the past week, uniting disparate parts of Turkish society in dissatisfaction with Erdogan and anger over what protesters and international critics have described as a heavy-handed response by the security forces. The result has been the biggest challenge to Erdogan and his governing Justice and Development Party during their decade in power.
Turkey is on the boil. Members of Turkey's major trade unions banged drums and carried banners as they made their way to the Taksim Square, the site of demonstrations that began more than a week ago. Similar protests were held in the capital Ankara and other Turkish cities. At least 2 people have been killed in the unrest and thousands injured.
All teachers in Turkey, all teacher unions today are on strike. We don't go to schools, we don't go our workshops, we don't go work. We are all in Taksim and we are shouting against government to get off government. We are the teachers of Turkey and we don't want you.
In order for these people to leave, the government has to be more proactive. By proactive, I mean they have to come down here and communicate with these people directly because they want to be heard and they want to be acknowledged. And I don't think an insincere apology by government officials on TV is not going to solve this.
It was a heavy-handed police response to a peaceful demonstration in Istanbul that sparked nationwide anti-government protest denouncing Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, who has been in power since 2002. Most of the anger has been directed at the Prime Minister, who is accused of becoming increasingly authoritarian and seeking to force conservative Islamic values on Turkey, a mainly Muslim but constitutionally secular nation. Prime Minister was due back in Turkey Thursday after a trip to Africa, with thousands of angry demonstrators calling for his resignation as protests entered the 7th day.
He's a dictator. Of course, this protest is about this park and our freedom and our personal spaces, but it's also about his dictatorship and we want him gone.
Last week's protest began with a relatively small and peaceful demonstration against the plan to bulldoze 606 trees in Gezi Park, reportedly one of the few remaining green spots in Istanbul, in order to construct a shopping mall modelled on Ottoman-era barracks as well as a mosque. It spiraled into something much bigger, largely as a spontaneous response to police action, eventually bringing out in force various segments of society resentful of Erdogan's rule and sparking mobilizations elsewhere across the country. Although the police were withdrawn from Taksim Square for a day or so, the use of tear gas and water cannon accounted for innumerable injuries. 2 people have been killed and more than 3,000 injured in the 6 days of unrest, dealing a blow to the Prime Minister's image at home and abroad.
UN envoy Lakhdar Brahimi says Syrian sides are not ready to attend planned Geneva International Conference before July. So when the talks take place is very uncertain, and so is Syria's future. Meanwhile, the Syrian army has taken control of a UN-monitored crossing in Golan Heights, which had been overrun by rebel forces. The rebels captured the Quneitra crossing on Thursday after clashes with the Syrian forces.
The Syrian army recaptured Syria's only crossing to Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, Syrian state television reported on Thursday. Just a few hours earlier, an opposition group said Syrian rebels had seized the Quneitra crossing after battling Syrian forces in the city.
The terrorists who are trying to get Israel and Syria into a fight might hit Israel with something. This is why they retreated. They were pushed out. But you will see in the next few days, it will all be cleaned. These terrorists who are here will be uprooted all the way to the border with Jordan.
The fighting came a day after Syrian troops, backed by Lebanon's Hezbollah militants, retook the key town of Qusair after a 3-week siege. The battle for Qusair has highlighted Hezbollah's growing role in the crisis. Meanwhile, UN's international envoy to Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, said the Geneva Peace Conference will be further delayed.
Americans and the Russians have agreed in Moscow on the 7th of May, and everybody has supported that. And the Syrian sides expressed their interest in this, is to get the Syrian sides, without preconditions, to see how they can implement the communique of the 30th of June. This is what it is all about. And the Syrian sides are not ready, so it's not a sticking point on the room above.
The meeting might be held in July, he said, after preparatory talks with the US and Russian officials. The idea for Geneva 2 came from the US and Russia, 2 countries which do not agree on most things concerning Syria. But for the first time in months, they agreed at the beginning of May on a plan for the way forward.
The Obama administration confirmed the existence of a classified US government program that gathers data on foreign nationals from the internet companies, defending the effort as legally authorized and essential to thwarting terrorist attacks. The disclosure came a day after reports emerged of a secret court order compelling Verizon Communications Incorporated to provide the National Security Agency with data on all its customers' calls. While the revelation stirred outrage among privacy rights advocates, US lawmakers from both parties acknowledged earlier that they were aware of the Verizon order and backed the collection of telephone records as necessary to combating terrorism.
The Obama administration on Thursday acknowledged that it is collecting a massive amount of telephone records from at least one carrier, reopening the debate over privacy even as it defended the practice as necessary to protect Americans against attack. The admission comes after the Guardian newspaper published a secret court order related to the records of millions of Verizon Communications customers on its website. A senior administration official did not specifically confirm the report, but noted the published court order pertains only to data such as telephone number or the length of a call, and not the subscriber's identity or the content of the calls.
I want to just ask, could you assure to us that no phones inside the Capitol were monitored of members of Congress that would give a future executive branch, if they started pulling this kind of thing off, would give them unique leverage over the legislature?
With all due respect, Senator, I don't think this is an appropriate setting for me to discuss that issue. I'd be more than glad to come back in an appropriate setting to discuss the issues that you have raised. But in this open forum, I don't.
The revelation raises fresh concerns about President Barack Obama's handling of privacy and free speech issues. His administration is already under fire for searching Associated Press journalists' calling records and the emails of a Fox television reporter as part of its inquiries into leaked government information. Verzian has declined to comment. It remains unclear whether the practice extends to other carriers.
With that, time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
North and South Korea agreed to hold talks over reopening suspended joint projects, including a landmark industrial park shuttered earlier this year. The surprise development marked a breakthrough after relations between the neighbors hit a new low this year, although progress in talks isn't assured. Seoul is seeking security guarantees from Pyongyang for their shared ventures. Former Maldives President Maumoon Abdul Gayoom, during his 3-day visit to India, met Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and External Affairs Minister Salman Khurshid. Gayoom conveyed his appreciation for India's assistance for development of the Maldives over a long period of time. He discussed issues relating to the current situation in Maldives and India-Maldives bilateral relations and said that he looked forward to India's continued assistance. An abduction and killing of 3 workers of MQM party brought a shock of silence in Karachi. The city came to a standstill when a shutdown was called by a political party to observe a day of mourning on Thursday. This shutdown took place after some unidentified gunmen abducted 4 and later killed 3 of them on Wednesday. Thousands of people took part in an anti-government protest rally in Brussels on Thursday to protest against Belgium government's new austerity measures, which include public sector pay cuts, layoffs and other measures. Belgium union FGTB said that the government should take this protest rally as a warning. Freezing salaries and shortening termination notice will not help in overcoming economic crisis, but it might provoke a backlash at the next general elections.
And now a look at all the sports news that you might have missed through this week. A quick look at that in sports action.
The Mercedes Formula One team has been ordered to appear before the Sports International Tribunal for allegedly breaking the rules by testing during the season with their current car. Formula One's governing body, the International Automobile Federation, said in a statement it had decided on the action after investigating the test conducted in Spain with tyre supplier Pirelli between May 15th and May 17th. No time was set for the tribunal, which could impose stiff sanctions against Mercedes if they are found to have acted illegally. Former Bangladesh captain Mohammad Ashraful confessed to match fixing after being suspended by his National Cricket Board pending an investigation. Ashraful made his confession during questioning by the International Cricket Council's Anti-Corruption and Security Unit, which has been investigating claims of fixing. Everton named Roberto Martinez as their new manager on Wednesday, with the former Wigan Athletic boss pledging to bring Champions League football to the Premier League club. Martinez, who has forged a reputation for making the best of limited resources and playing attractive football, has signed a 4-year contract to succeed David Moyes, who has taken over from the retired Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. Brazil striker Neymar signed a 5-year contract with FC Barcelona. Barca beat arch rivals Real Madrid to the highly rated 21-year-old's signature last weekend after almost 3 years of interest from Europe's top clubs. Barcelona said the deal was sealed at $74.6 million. Brazil hosts the Confederations Cup, the 8-nation warm-up event for next year's World Cup finals from June 15th to June 30th.
Have a quick look at the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie hit the red carpet at the Berlin's premiere of Pitt's World War Z. Hundreds of fans were waiting for the famous couple and sang happy birthday for Jolie, who turned 38 on 4th of June. Jolie, wearing a strapless white dress, signed autographs and joined Pitt posing for the press before she made her way off the red carpet. In World War Z, Pitt plays United Nations representative Jerry Lane, who is enlisted to help stop a zombie pandemic that is stopping armies and governments and threatening to destroy mankind. World War Z marks Pitt's first foray as the star and producer of his own potential franchise. Actor, writer, director Seth Rogen arrived on the red carpet in Los Angeles, where he joined his buddies for the premiere of his new film, the apocalyptic comedy This This Is the End. Directed by Rogen and Evan Goldberg, the film follows 6 friends who happen to be Hollywood stars, including the likes of James Franco, Emma Watson and Jonah Hill, who also happen to be playing themselves, trapped in a house after a series of strange and catastrophic events devastate Los Angeles. This Is the End opens on June 12. Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler are streaming their new album 13 in a week ahead of its official release date. Reuniting the group's founding lineup for the first time in 35 years, 13 was recorded in Los Angeles alongside veteran producer Rick Rubin and features Rage Against the Machine's Brad Wilk on drums. In support of the album, the band will embark on a North American tour starting in late July. Paris Jackson, the 15-year-old daughter of late pop star Michael Jackson, was rushed to a Los Angeles area hospital on Wednesday after an apparent suicide attempt. Paris reportedly cut her wrists with a meat cleaver and took as many as 20 ibuprofen tablets before calling suicide hotline, which immediately called 911. Paris also left a suicide note. Jackson's children live under the custody of their 83-year-old grandmother Catherine and their cousin TJ Jackson.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. As I sign off, take a look at these colorful visuals from Brazil. Even as early rain and grey skies did little to dampen the spirits of millions of revelers who came out to celebrate the world's largest gay pride parade in Sao Paulo. Goodbye.